Welcome to Talk+Water, the podcast associated with the Texas+Water newsletter, which provides timely information on the spectrum of Texas water issues, including science, policy, and law. Texas+Water is published jointly by the Meadows Center for Water and the Environment at Texas State University, the Texas Water Journal, and the Texas Water Resource Institute at Texas A&M University. You can sign up for Texas+Water by visiting texaspluswater.org/newsletter. My name is Todd Bottler, and I'm the editor-in-chief of Texas+Water and the editor-in-chief of the Texas Water Journal, as well as your host for Texas+Water. This is podcast number 9. My guests today, multiple guests, are Aaron Keyes, who is the director of the Water Riot for the Austin Technology Incubator at the University of Texas at Austin, John Higley, who is Chief Executive Officer for Environmental Quality Operations, and Jim Brotherton, who is CEO of Hydroid. So this is going to be a presentation about technology and water. And this is the first time I've done multiple people, and we're all in the same space. We're not, I don't have anybody on the phone. And so we're going to see how this goes. So welcome, Aaron, John, and Jim. Thank you for being part of Texas+Water. And Aaron is grinning. Did I mess up already, or did...
No, and that was actually my fault. So Hydroid is Jim's first product. I think his LLC is H2O Optimized.
Oh, H2O Optimized.
H2O Optimized, yeah, that's right. Yep.
So that was my fault.
Oh, no worries there. So, Aaron, let's start out with a little bit about your background in water and how you became involved in water issues.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having us, Todd. So I actually spent 12 years in the electric utility industry. So I come at water issues more from the energy side. And I first started becoming more familiar with the water side whenever I was working for Itron, which is a large corporation that works in the smart grid for both gas and water and electricity. So that was my first foray into kind of the similar things that we focus on with respect to Water Riot, which is the IoT and data side, but not applied to the electric utility industry, but applied to the water utility industry. I also was a researcher for Dr. Michael Weber, and he is a researcher at UT Austin who works a lot on energy, water, food nexus type issues. So my graduate research actually also incorporated some water issues. I did research on how to alleviate some grid constraints, some electric grid constraints, using water pumps. So it was the coincidence of those two issues. But I'm excited to be more on the water side now. I think there's been a lot of advances in the energy industry, and water is a little bit more nascent, and there's big opportunities in water to learn from what has happened in the electric utility industry.
And so the Austin Technology Incubator is trying to help startups, kind of resolve or solve those issues that are associated with that. And so why don't you tell us about that? Because, ATI is just pretty unique, I think.
Yeah, so ATI actually is the longest running startup business incubator in the country. We just celebrated our 30th anniversary. And we actually have 2 programs related to water. We have different verticals at ATI. That's Austin Technology Incubator for short, all kind of related to different aspects of sustainability. We also have a healthcare vertical, but we have an entire vertical dedicated to water, and that is more widespread in terms of the water issues that these startups are addressing. Perfect example is John's company, Environmental Quality Operations, which deals with zebra mussels. He'll be talking more about that. Water Riot is kind of an adjacent program that was funded by the Economic Development Administration, and it's more focused on data and IoT being the Internet of Things. So how do we connect different devices for different end goals? And so Water Riot and the water vertical are both kind of these programs to help startups pretty much locally in Texas. We like to be in person with our companies because there's a lot of goodness that comes from that direct contact, and connecting them with the right mentors in order to advance their ventures to the next level, the right financiers. So whether that's, family offices or VCs or, corporate partners that might be interested in acquisitions, other types of workshops and networking events that will connect them to the right people in the community. And we really try to focus on deep technology. So there's a lot of accelerators out there that are more programmatic, 3 months at a time. We're all running these startups through the same type of curriculum. And we work with these, quote, deep technology startups a little bit longer because a lot of them are more, primary scientific and engineering discoveries that take longer to get to market because they're more advanced in terms of product development or FDA approval or, regulatory approval of some sort. So we do work with our startups for longer, maybe, 1 to even 2 years at a time.
And just for the sake of full disclosure, I'm now, part of a group of folks who are helping out with mentoring, and it's really fascinating to me. I mean, I've been in the water industry, water area for about 30 years, but it was mostly associated with public policy, and so this is a kind of a new thing for me, and I really found it fascinating. So how do you recruit your mentors, and how do you bring these folks in to help the new startups associated with the Austin Technology Incubator?
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely some primary contacts, but it's also, degrees of separation. It's just the network effect. Our director of the Austin Technology Incubator has been a longtime Austinite, and so is very well connected in the Austin community. And it's everything from former startup founders that have been very successful themselves to lawyers in law firms that are focused on, patent technology for startups, to, marketeers who are very skilled in sales and marketing, and that's something that a lot of our startup founders need a lot of help with as well. So it's really kind of word of mouth right now. It's a program that we licensed from MIT. It's called Text VMS. Originally, MIT started it. It's called the Venture Mentoring Service, and it is focused on more team-based mentoring. You mentioned that you're on a team, and instead of, pairing one entrepreneur with one mentor, there is a lot of, quality type consulting that comes out of mentors bouncing ideas off of one another and kind of being in more of a group setting. So it's growing. You mentioned, how do we get them? Again, you start with 20, we start growing from there based on those mentors telling their friends who are interested in giving back to the community. So, there's folks who are also ex-executives at large corporations that are just kind of looking for ways to help the next, big thing.
Great. And so, in addition to recruiting mentors, the companies, the startups themselves, they apply to be part of the program. And like, I guess John and Jim did, they had to go through some kind of application process. Yep,
exactly. So we get a lot of inbound inquiries, but there's also all sorts of pitch competitions or, entrepreneurs inside of universities. We serve both UT as well as the community all across Texas. There are also folks who are doing research who are interested in commercializing their technologies. So, we go recruit folks outbound, but then we have an application on our website, and we get tons of references as well.
So what's your website? Well, let's make sure we get that here so that I know you are probably going to have to look it up. But I want to make sure we mention that because there'll be people listening who are saying, hey, I'd like to try that out.
Yep. So it's ati.utexas.edu.
Right. And so the Water Riot, now explain a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so that's more of an ecosystem development play. And what I mean by that is trying to get together all the different stakeholders in Texas who have an interest in the Internet of Things and data as it relates to water. And that can be anything from startups themselves to corporations to investors to universities to nonprofits. We're actually in our third year. And, everything from just putting workshops together where all of these people can convene to making personal connections between these folks if they have shared interest in something that's going on in Texas. But the whole goal is to incubate and demonstrate technologies with this IoT and data focus inside of the Texas water sector.
Gotcha. And so some examples, I guess, of the kind of companies that are part of the Water Riot.
Yeah, so I mean, H2O Optimize is a perfect example of both an incubator company. They are a member of the Awesome Technology Incubator, but they also are a member of this ecosystem that we're developing. And you'll hear more from Jim about his technology, but it is a perfect example of a, quote, data-focused company and an IoT-focused company within the water sector.
Great. So let's go ahead and talk to our other guests here. First of all, John.
Hi.
How you doing, John?
Good. How are you?
I'm well. And so, I always start off with a question about people's water backgrounds or how they got involved in water issues. So why don't we start with that?
Well, I first got the idea for this years and years ago whenever zebra mussels had just come to Texas. So it's probably 2009, 2010, because people were complaining about it. It usually takes about a year before they grow enough for people to start complaining. Anyway, so I was the senior director of R&D at a biopharma company developing oncology products, so cancer cures, essentially. And I was at a Christmas party. I promise this gets to water. I was at a Christmas party, and a family member of mine and my best friend were both complaining about zebra mussels. My best friend because he has a lake house on Texoma, and my family member because he works in water utility type stuff. And as the biologist there, I'm a molecular biologist by training, but still as the biologist there, I was pretty embarrassed that I didn't know what a zebra mussel was. So I went and did my trick of for social anxiety at parties, and that's to go and look at peer-reviewed journal articles. And I started going through EBSCO and PubMed and realizing, wow, there's a real need here for some of the technologies that we utilize in early cancer diagnostics, microbiome analytics, and like smart drug biopharmaceutical stuff for use for those types of technologies in the environmental space. So from that, I kind of have the idea for a company. Originally, I was just thinking of how to make a smart drug to just kill them. That's very hard to get funding for right out the gate. Eventually, after I left that company to go work with Thermo Fisher, and I was working with them to help get some products that they had from diagnostic or R&D products into the clinical field. And since I had done preclinical to clinical pipeline before, they brought me in to help with that. And I realized microbiome, early cancer diagnostics, we can start with a diagnostic platform and start doing kind of population dynamics, live versus dead, and really mapping in not just aquatic invasive species, but you can do that for endangered species as well. So then I got a little piddly grant, and then about 4 years ago or so, and that took about a year for me to finish up the research for, and then EQO came out of that about 3 years ago. And in the last year or so is when we've really fully launched and started getting some traction and got an automated sampler that's really cool that gets installed out at places, and that's kind of how I got into the water world.
So what are kind of the issues around zebra mussels? What I think some people listening will be familiar with them, especially if you live someplace where they've already arrived. But there are other parts of the country where they have yet to make their presence known, and so why are they a problem, and where are they from?
Yeah, so this is a bad 80s movie. They showed up in the Great Lakes originally in the mid-80s, middle of the Red Scare, and they come from Russia. They're from the Black and Caspian Sea initially, so there are Russian invaders. It's Ivan Drago and zebra mussels. And so anyway, so why are they so bad? Because, one thing I hear is like, but they make the lake look really pretty. They do clarify the lake, but that's not a good thing in this case at all. So one thing is that there are these super high efficiency filter feeders. Where they come from, there's not a lot of nutrients in the water, so they've kind of evolved to just be really efficient at filtering everything out that they possibly can. So they show up in lakes, especially here in Central Texas, where We have tons of calcium, so they don't really have any limitation on how many shells they can grow, and there's tons of nutrients in the water. They grow completely out of control. And so while the lake may look prettier as far as it being clear, what it also does is they'll eat all the primary food sources for all the kind of fish in the lake that live off of phytoplankton or small zooplankton in the water column, and they will not eat any of the toxic algae. They just spit it right back out. So it becomes a perfect niche environment for toxic algae blooms to take place. Massive human health issue, problem for agriculture as well. They're also quite sharp, cut feet on them, not great there. And they cause the U.S. alone $7 billion worth of infrastructure damage annually because they grow on top of each other. They just completely clog things.
So, I started learning a lot more about zebra mussels a few years ago when I began to work with endangered or likely to be listed as endangered mussels here in Central Texas. And those mussels, the native mussels, they have a different life cycle. They have an intermediate fish host and stuff. That's not the case with zebra mussels. Yeah,
so we call them zebra mussels. They're actually the genus is Dreissena, which is the proper term for them. They're a pseudo mussel. They have a very different biology than the kind of native Unionidae mussels that we have here in Texas. They don't burrow. They don't crawl around the dirt. They have these little legs that come out. They have two proteins that interlock like a two-part epoxy, essentially, and they glue them to something, and then they grow from there. And they kind of, their method of reproduction is spray and pray. It's just sperm, eggs, let's see what happens, and they settle back down. They can move a little bit as a veliger once they stick. There are cases of them getting dislodged and moving, but they're totally different from native mussels. They're the only thing that makes them mussels is they kind of look like mussels. Yeah. But the other problem with the native mussels is that they will grow on top of the native mussel's shells to the point where they'll cover the native mussels. They can't breathe. And like you mentioned, we have a number of native mussels here in Texas that are going to be listed very soon as endangered, and their zebra mussels make them even more at risk. So it's a pretty massive issue. And so there's a lot of concern around that currently, and we've reached out to a couple folks over at Texas A&M and TSU that we're going to be partnering with to work specifically on that problem.
Good. And so your technology, it could help water managers with their zebra mussel problems, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we kind of do whole life cycle stuff. I'll kind of get into the why we're different from some of the other things. There's this big push in the industry right now to move towards more what we call eDNA or environmental DNA. The issue with that, though, is that just looking at environmental DNA doesn't actually give the manager really any actionable information. DNA exists in the water column for a very long period of time. A good friend of mine finished his postdoc here at UT looking at ancient DNA out of Peru, like these tens of thousands of years old. So you can imagine it sticks around the water column for a bit too. Even if it's not associated with a particle, even if it's dissolved in the water, it does persist for quite some time. So when you're getting a DNA signal, all you really know is that it was there at some point in time. It doesn't mean that it's alive. It could be something else ate one and pooped it out. It could be, somebody had a dead one on their boat and brought it in. The DNA is the same. It sticks around the water column. So what we do differently is we do look at eDNA to establish trends over time, and it's a very useful tool for risk assessment and prevention. It's useful for that because you can see where they're coming in, where you're most likely to get something. But we also look at environmental RNA. And if we remember our Biology 301 classes, DNA is a very stable molecule. That's the blueprint. RNA is the message that you're sending to the contractor, right? And then that's a very unstable molecule. It breaks apart very fast, just like a piece of paper does. And then the proteins do all the work. That's kind of the contractor. So RNA, since it breaks down so quickly, is a great way, if you can stabilize that, you can take a snapshot of everything that's going on in that water. So that's what we're really interested in, because then we can see, is it alive or dead? Is it responding to stress? Is it going to be producing eggs sometime soon? Like, is it about to spawn? All of those, by intercepting those messages, essentially, we can kind of see what they're doing. That allows us to play not just in the early detection space, but also detect them early enough so that you can knock out a population like what we did with TPWD last summer. And if you already have an infestation, we're the only ones that can really provide any kind of quality control to let you know if the treatments that you're using in your pipelines are effective or not. Because right now, you can dump all the chemical in there you want, or copper, or whatever it is that your weapon of choice, but you're really not a way to tell if it's being effective and that you're killing them or not. Some people like to use visual inspection. I've played with these things a lot, man. It's hard to tell if they're alive or dead. You just start getting an incrustation that goes faster or slower, and that's not really determining if your chemical treatment is effective. We can provide real-time mitigation support to aid in that. We're also actively working with the Bureau of Reclamation, creating that smart drug that I originally wanted to do. Yeah. That's going forward now, so we're working on that. That's an ongoing R&D project.
So your technology does a lot more than just say, hey, there's zebra mussels here.
Yeah.
It tells you a lot about the population that a water manager would want to know if they're trying to figure out how do I respond.
Yeah, if you want to have effective mitigation and you want to make sure that what happens, there have been some issues in the past where improper mitigation leads to either massive costs for replacement or really bad outcomes as far as taste and smell and whatnot, like we had here in Austin and back in February. Those are things that can happen and it's not like it's anybody's really fault. It's just that the current technologies, there's not a way to avoid that with what's available outside of what we're offering.
So, how has ATI and the Water Riot helped EQO during its developmental phase? How's kind of going back to what Aaron told us? What's been the benefit to EQO?
It's massive. So we started out. We got involved with ATI through our laboratory space. We're housed at the Austin Bioscience Incubator, which is at the Austin Community College Highland campus. They have an amazing space there with wet labs and millions of dollars worth of equipment, and it's extremely affordable. So we started there. We were, I think, their first company. And while we were there, I was meeting with Cindy Walker-Peach, who I actually used to work with at Ambion years ago, back in my traditional biotech days. And she had recommended that we do something called the SEAL program, which UT puts on in association with ATI. And SEAL is a startup accelerator that's kind of intensive, hey, smart guys at the university or wherever you've developed some cool new product, is that marketable? Is this a real company? And then you kind of take an intense summer MBA course, essentially, on technology commercialization. And at the end of that thing, you say, yes, we're a company, or no, we're not. We came out of that saying, yeah, this is a real thing. We can really do this. And then it was not long after that we were approached by Mitch Jacobson, who runs ATI, to join formally on with ATI. Austin Bioscience Incubator, where we're housed, has a close relationship with ATI as well, which is why I got to talk to Cindy and Lisa and some of the other people at ATI who would come over, and basically they just show up and allow office hours for the companies there to come in there and pick their brain and say, what am I doing? What should I do? And all of those kind of things. So that's kind of our journey to ATI. And since then, we've done a couple other accelerators. We won Mass Challenge's first Texas cohort, got $100,000 out of them, and we're part of Capital Factory now.
Yeah. So this is a perfect example of the fact that, we get references from a variety of partners throughout Austin as well as nationally, and the incubator companies that we have are very welcome to participate in other programs simultaneously, knowing that there are different needs, and a lot of incubators and accelerators can fill some needs, better than us, and vice versa. So we really encourage our companies to be as involved as possible, beyond just our own program.
And so, living in Austin, people know a lot more about zebra mussels now than they did about a year ago.
Yeah.
And so, I imagine that there are a lot of other cities that are kind of, I guess, maybe in the path of where the zebra mussels are spreading that might see that, technology like yours might be really useful to them. But I guess, that's something you have to get people thinking proactively.
Right. Yeah, that's the issue. yes, we do play in the whole life cycle, from prevention to mitigation. However, stopping the spread, it's very similar with cancer. Early detection is cure is the thing that we used to always say in cancer diagnostic development. And this is the same thing. Early detection is cure. We've caught these things early enough in places and been able to wipe them out. Colorado had 7 lakes that they considered infested. They have 0 infested lakes right now. There are ways to do this. If you catch it early and you're proactive, you will save yourself millions of dollars down the road. So, there are towns and cities in Texas and in the West that we're very concerned about. Outside of Texas, Montana, Idaho are a big thing. Just thing I like to tell people so they understand where they're most likely to show up next. The favorite riverway of these things has been the I-35 corridor. That's the way that they spray. They will go downstream and that kind of thing. People are watching that. But if you look at where they've come through, it's I-30 and I-35. And it's pretty clear and direct when you watch them year after year that I-35 is their favorite riverway.
The people's boats, and the back trailers going from one lake to the other. Yeah,
clean, drain, dry. And the big thing is, man, those wakeboard boats, they carry around a ballast so they can throw a bigger wake, which is a lot of fun. However, that's essentially a traveling aquarium.
Yeah.
And there's not a great way to drain those. So if you own a wakeboard boat, I encourage you mightily to call Parks and Wildlife and ask about the best practices and procedures for how to utilize your boat if you want to take it to a lake that you're unfamiliar with.
But it's almost in some ways. It seems in many ways it's so hard to stop the spread of them when individuals can transport them around so easily, and you can't miss anybody who's got a boat. One person doesn't really, follow the protocols. And
there's a little hope in there though. So usually these things you have to introduce them a few times before the population will really take off. And some of that's just because they're still on the boat. So they have to be kind of spawning when they hit, and then they also have to have those sperms and egg come together when they hit. And even then, that first generation likely won't turn into a full population unless you bring in more and more each time.
Okay.
And the reason for that, part of it is since you think about how they kind of cluster and how I say they kind of spray and pray for how they breed. So that means that in those clusters, they're all pretty closely related. So this is how Colorado got rid of them. Those small populations will essentially inbreed themselves to death. When you have low genetic diversity in a group, any kind of selection pressure against that group is more likely to wipe it out. In ecology, essentially, diversity is the strongest thing you can do to protect your population. These guys are a bunch of brothers and sisters mating with each other. So they will crash their own populations if you don't introduce new ones if you don't continue to introduce new. So it doesn't take just one boat. It can, but that's very rare. So it's kind of like the more you can talk about it, the more this problem can be pushed down. Colorado's done it effectively, and Texas is trying real hard.
So that's really interesting to know, because when I was part of the group of water managers who were meeting a few years ago trying to figure out what to do, we were under the impression it was something like that, one introduction and you're kind of sunk. So it's good to know it's more complicated than that. So let's go ahead and turn to Jim. So Jim, you've been very patient, waiting to talk about your technology, but let's start off with a little bit about yourself and your background in water.
Sure. So I've actually got a long background in technology, and my introduction to water was a close friend of mine had a ranch house that he went to visit that he hadn't been there for a while, and he had a new lake pond on his property, and his water well had busted a pipe and literally flooded enough to create an above-ground lake. So knowing I have a technology background and some experience in startups, we got together and started working on a solution to how we could do remote reporting and monitoring of, second homes, that kind of thing. And that led into what we're doing today. So other background information on that is that I did some stints in the oil field industry and was building ultrasonic tools and wanted to see if we could apply that technology to flooding, because I'm down in San Marcos. We've been through a couple of floods over the past few years. Had lots of folks that close to me affected by that. So interested in seeing if we could use that technology to do early flood warning. So we have that in plan as well, but we started with water distribution as our first product, which is the Hydroid product.
So why don't you tell us about that product?
Sure. Hydroid is a smart water meter, so it's very similar if you're familiar with Nest. It's very similar to the Nest thermostat that way. It's loaded with sensors. It's to be placed at the end of the pipe, so it's not a municipality distribution device. It's actually on the demand side, the consumer side, but it's loaded with sensors like pressure sensors and water temperature, air temperature, humidity, that type of thing, as well as a high-resolution ultrasonic sensor. So we have real high-resolution water flow analysis, so we can give you real-time daily totals, weekly, monthly, which allows you to baseline your water consumption, where you can start monitoring it, managing it, and ultimately conserving water is the goal. We send all this data up to the cloud so that you can interact with it with the cloud dashboard or to your mobile phone. And integrated in the hardware is a valve, so you can literally receive alert from us from either a leak alert or busted pipe, that kind of thing, freeze alert, and do something about it and shut the valve to prevent further damage or loss.
So the app on your phone would tell you get a water problem.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly.
I tell you what, since every house my family has owned has had a water heater that the bottom of it rusted out and flooded the floor below, or we're going to get you for doing that, John. or that's all right. That's all right. Or a washing machine, or a pipe that out of Montana, a pipe that busted during the winter, and we didn't know for hours or days in one case, and so I would love to have something like this, so I'd get some kind of immediate notice.
Yeah, right. As far as insurance and leaks, water damage from leaks is the third highest claim for insurance. And over the past 10 years, the average cost was about $10,000. So it's a real problem. And most people actually, it's not that we're irresponsible water users. It's most of us just have no idea. The technology out there today doesn't really give us good leak detection or even, management of your water yet. And so I think there's a lot of advancements that we can help with creating water awareness so that people can understand what their water consumptions look like, where they waste water, and they can have an effect on that water, whether it's you're in a municipality, whether you're on a water well, for all of our aquifer systems here that we all now, after the drought that we've been through recently, I think we're much more aware of that. And so this is kind of where this product plays.
And so I can imagine, in addition to, the reasons related to conservation, that there's actually a pretty significant financial incentive. Going forward, you're going to see more and more rate increases for water and in municipalities, and so this is a way to cut down on your use and save some money.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting because a lot of conversations that we have, if you're a homeowner, prices seem to be, somewhat, in my opinion, artificially low for what they could be. If you're a business and you're a high water consumer, or if you're an apartment or a condominium, you are in the highest water tier, and your water prices are not cheap. And it just so happens that if you're an individual homeowner, you're generally floating around the lowest pricing for water, so it doesn't feel that expensive to you. But for a business, it becomes a very expensive proposition. A leak, a running toilet, that kind of thing can affect your bill drastically. A restaurant owner I talked to said that just a leaky toilet will cost him $600, and that's right out of his bottom line. So it is hard cost for them.
There's one going off right now in the room next to us. I have to see. I walked in there and I was like, "Who do I call? I can't get this thing to stop running." So tell us about how the awesome technology incubator and Water Riot have helped you with your technology.
Yeah, they do things a lot differently than other incubators, accelerators, and as Aaron was saying earlier, this long relationship is absolutely really crucial. I also went through the SEAL program. I don't think we were in the same one though. No. So I went through the SEAL program. Really helpful. But one thing I have to say is really different is most of these accelerators do this speed dating thing through what most of them call office hours kind of meetings, and it's 20 to 30 minute meetings with mentors. And what ATI really does differently is bring in experts in what you do, people that have done this kind of thing, and you sit with them as long as you need to. And basically we meet about every month, and we go through really hard problems and discussions for with a team of people that have been through these issues, and they take the time and follow up. And so you build this relationship with people that are intimately involved to support you over this longer period of time. And I just haven't seen anybody else that does something like that. And the difference is, immeasurable. It's very valuable to us.
So
thanks, Jim.
Yeah, that was good.
I agree with all that too.
And they're not reading from scripts, by the way. So, talking about water conservation more broadly, I've had the opportunity to be involved with water use in various parts of the state, and have seen how in some of the major cities it was close to 300 gallons per capita per day, and has come down by half or more. And what I always find interesting is water managers used to talk about, well, there's not much you can do about that, or there's not really that much room to improve efficiency, but it just seems like there's ever more room. And I remember someone telling me, you can't go below 100 gallons per person per day. That's less than they have available in some desert in Africa.
Right.
And I was like, oh, okay, is that right? And so, somebody recently told me, that they're actually trying to get their cities looking at getting it below 100 to get it like 90 or something. I mean, it seems like keep finding there's more and more, to conserve there.
Yeah, for sure. I'm right there with you. We actually have an example of that. So one of our users has 39,000 gallons of rain catchment. So all their water is above ground, and they know they have a finite source basically where they know how much they have that they could use, and so they are using Hydroid to create a water budget. And so they were shooting for 100 gallons. It's a family of 4, 2,500 square foot home, something like this, acreage of property, and they are hitting under 100 gallons of water a day. And what it really did for them is give them a sense of confidence, because they had no other way to measure how much water they were using at all. So now that they know that they're on target. So if they slip once in a while, that it's okay, but they have real-time readings for it. So it's absolutely possible. I don't do that at my house. I have a horse and dogs and cats and chickens and a container garden. And we see some of the things that are really interesting about our own water use, and where we started learning how to conserve water better. And that's things like just having above ground garden and our watering practices. We could water this garden. It would use 400 gallons of water just to water our garden. And it was amazing to us. I think people don't actually really generally understand how much water they put on their grass. I think that's a good place for conservation, as well as the gardens or any of their shrubs and bushes. And so we put into a new practice where we started working on what our mulching practice was, so that we could start bringing down how frequently we did that watering schedule. And I think that by having that kind of data and recognizing that we could move into a better practice of water use for something we enjoy to do, because it's the most expensive tomato you'll ever eat when you grow your own. So anyways, we've done a better job of conserving water, just personally.
And so it's interesting to me that we're not only just talking about people having it for their house and they're connected up to the municipal system, but for groundwater well owners and for people who have rain catchment systems. I mean, so it's really a broader potential for use than I'd kind of thought of.
Yeah, we designed it that way as well. We've had some interesting conversations with ranchers where their big fear is actually that water doesn't get distributed across their property and that they don't have the range. So we built some features into the technology so that we could connect an external antenna and send it across, miles, the data, so that they can make sure that their cattle are getting water. Because they have no idea. They have to drive out there to see if the float system is working. If it doesn't, they could lose cattle. So we had that in mind when we designed the tech. I have a water well. We designed around how the water well would be so we can get range and flow and that kind of thing with the battery operated, which other folks are doing. We're doing solar. It can be operated on solar as well, and rain catchment. So there's a lot of things that are built into it so that we can offer this diversity to people that are interested in whatever they're. Water has this thing where it's pervasive. So there's a lot of different uses that people will dream up with when they can get some data on how they're using water or manage or control their water. So we try to account for a lot of that.
So let's just kind of throw this open for everybody. And I just want to kind of go back to you, Aaron. When I listened to John and Jim talk about their technologies, I mean, really, at the heart of it, it's like information. Like we're getting information about what's in the water column and what it might be doing, or we're getting more information about how we're using our water.
Yep.
And so those things lead to really behavioral change, right? I mean, hey, I'm not going to maybe leave my lawn sprinkler going as long, or I could do this to reduce my water use at home, or maybe we ought to be thinking about checking boats when they're coming in, or encouraging people to take the responsibility on of making sure that they don't contaminate one body of water that isn't contaminated yet with zebra mussels, and so. But a lot of it kind of underlying is how we're making information more easily available and exchanging it, and I think that's a lot of your. Would you say a lot of the technologies that ATI is involved with are really about just kind of more information exchange, making it more readily available or easier for consumers to figure out what they're doing?
That is definitely an underlying theme. It can also be a material science breakthrough for a battery, or it can be designing a better way to purify water. So it really runs the gamut. But as I mentioned with Water Riot, that is kind of the underlying theme, is this information gathering, because to your point, if you don't know what's happening, you can't change it, and you don't even know if it should be changed. So I think that was a great kind of theme that you pulled between these two. Even though the DNA and RNA sounds like more of a biotech advance, at the very heart of it, it is getting more information.
Yeah, that's some of our biggest value is to be able to say, okay, these are your hotspots, so you can manage your time and money more effectively for prevention, or turn up the chemical treatment, turn down the chemical treatment based on what we can say, and so we end up saving customers money on that end. But information is powerful. Without information and data, it's a black box and you're just guessing. And I think that's something Jim and I are both working on pretty hard, is to try and provide actionable information. Like I was saying with the eDNA stuff, knowing if it's there or not doesn't tell you anything. If it's not actionable information, it's not useful information. And so that's kind of certainly our goal, is to provide actionable, useful information that can be used in managerial decisions.
Yeah, I mentioned that a lot of what ATI does is, sustainability. I don't want that to be construed as, something that just deals with water conservation, for example,
right,
or energy conservation. That can just mean making better decisions about the resources that you have. Right. And that can span a variety of different verticals or a variety of different arenas. In the oil and gas industry, it could be making sure that you're able to, extract more efficiently, or being able to use water more effectively, or, be sure that you can desalinate the water on the back end in order to put it back into operations. So it's really about making sure that we're doing things as smart as possible, and a lot of that comes from technology advances, and that's why we're really focused on deep technology. Is how can we use technology in order to do what we currently do better, or just make stepwise changes in how we do things altogether if that's the better direction to go.
I remember the first meeting I went to that ATI held. It was a lunch meeting, and all the mentors were invited, and it was a company that was working on technology to use nano bubbles to clean produce instead of having to use as much water that they had to once through to clean the vegetables. And I was thinking, okay, in California, where you're growing a lot of, this is for lettuce, where you're growing a lot of lettuce, and you might be concerned about E. coli and things like that this technology was trying to get at. That's also not only kind of an agricultural play, but it's also a municipal and industrial play, because they're looking for ways to, reduce the amount of water they're using, which a lot goes for irrigation, and free some of that out for some other users, or allow irrigators to do that. I mean, that's, if you look at the Edwards Aquifer, one of the big solutions there was, creating a market and, allowing the irrigators who'd be given water rights to take some of those water rights and lease them or sell them for municipal or industrial users, or to other ag users, and to use that in part to fund more conservation technology, so they could stretch their ag production. And so a lot of it became a process of now we're looking at how we use our water, and we're determining we can produce the type of crops that we need with this amount using more efficient technologies, and here we have more that we could lease or sell to someone else. And so it becomes almost kind of a business where you're not only, for example, a farmer might not only be producing commodities, but they're also in the water business to some extent. And so, it's just kind of...
There's interplays between all of these verticals, for sure. You can cross-list many of the companies in the incubator in a variety of different verticals, either energy or water companies or circular economy companies. They all kind of have their tendrils in a variety of different aspects of what we do, which gets back to the nexus conversation. Energy, water, food, mobility. There's just a lot of externalities that kind of touch each one of those verticals.
Great. Well, boy, I love this. This has been fun to talk to you all about water and technology. Before we wrap up, anybody else have any questions or anything they want to add?
No, just thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you. This was great.
Yep. And if you have any more questions, feel free to reach out to ATI through our website, or Erin Keys is my name, EKEYS at ATI.utexas.edu, and same for these guys. I'll let them do their...
We should plug our pluggables. ECO's website is eqo.life. eqo.life. There's no .com. We're .life. Anyway, my name's John Higley. My email is john.higley, Higley, at eqo.life, and feel free to reach out with anything you'd like to know. I'll be playing at clubs and colleges across the country. Just kidding. Yeah.
You're going to take your zebra mussels on the road?
Yeah, exactly.
That's not a good idea.
Some kind of, no, not allowed to do that. That's a fine. That's some kind of 1800s grifter. No, not so much.
No. Jim?
Sure, Jim. So the website is hydroidmeter.com. You can reach me at jim@hydroidmeter.com. So that's easy enough. And full name is Jim Brotherton. So please, if you have any questions or looking for some trials or installations, or give us a call. We're willing to try anything.
And how do you spell hydroid real quick, just in case?
Yeah, HYDROID.
Gotcha. All right, so This has been Talk+Water, the podcast associated with the Texas+ Water newsletter, which provides timely information on the spectrum of Texas water issues, including science, policy, and law. Texas+ Water is published jointly by the Meadows Center for Water and the Environment at Texas State University, the Texas Water Journal, and the Texas Water Resource Institute at Texas A&M University. You can sign up for Texas+ Water by visiting texaspluswater.org/newsletter. My name is Todd Bottler, the host of Texas+ Water. Let's talk water again soon.